A low, heavy mist clung to the broken earth that morning, the kind that swallowed sound and made every breath feel colder than it should. In that pale half-light, a single figure lay pressed against the dirt, his fingers wrapped around the metal grip of a machine gun that had grown warm from hours of waiting. He had no radio, no backup, and no promise that help would ever arrive. What he did have was a clear order: hold the line, no matter what comes. For a long moment, there was nothing, no footsteps, no distant rumble, no hint of movement. It was the kind of silence that didn't bring peace, but an uneasy stillness that warned of something gathering just beyond the fog. The soldier kept his eyes fixed on the horizon, where shadows seemed to pulse in and out of view. His heartbeat was steady, slow, almost calm, but beneath that calm lived a truth he dared not speak: he was alone, facing an enemy force large enough to crush him within minutes. Then it happened, a faint metallic clatter, almost like someone brushing against a loose rifle barrel. He did not lift his head. He did not shift. He simply listened. The sound came again, clearer this time, followed by another, and then another. It was not one soldier. Not 10. Not even 50. It was the unmistakable rhythm of an army moving as one. Hundreds of boots pushing through mud, hundreds of breaths sinking into a single advancing force. A sharp chill ran through him, not from fear, but from certainty. The enemy had arrived. And if they broke through here, the men behind him, the ones still retreating, still reorganizing, still hoping for a second chance, would be swallowed whole. He steadied his machine gun and exhaled slowly. The weight of the moment pressed on his shoulders like a mountain. But he did not look back. He did not think of escape. His mission was simple, brutal, and absolute. One soldier, one machine gun, and an entire enemy force marching straight toward him. He tightened his grip. The first shapes in the fog began to emerge. The silence was over. The battle was about to begin. The fog thinned just enough for him to see the first row of enemy helmets glinting in the weak light. They moved in a slow, steady formation, unaware that a single man waited ahead, ready to challenge an entire force. His breath tightened as he counted the silhouettes: 10, 20, 30, and then the shapes blended together into a wave too large to measure. Still, he stayed silent, forcing himself to wait for the perfect moment. A single premature shot could expose his position before he had a chance to make it count. Memories flickered through his mind, not of home or childhood, but of the orders he had received only hours earlier. The line behind him was not just a defensive position, it was the last barrier protecting wounded soldiers, weary units regrouping, and supply routes that could not fall under any circumstance. If the enemy broke through here, everything behind him would collapse like a row of falling dominoes. He was not simply defending dirt, he was defending time, giving his comrades a chance to breathe, reload, reorganize, and live. The rumble grew louder. The earth itself seemed to tremble under the weight of hundreds of marching boots. His fingers brushed over each ammunition belt beside him, checking them by habit even though he had done it a dozen times already. There was no room for mistakes. No room for panic. Every bullet had to matter. Then the first enemy soldier stepped into clear view. The man's expression showed confidence, the kind born from numbers, not courage. Behind him, more soldiers followed, row after row, believing the path ahead was unguarded. They had no idea that a machine gun lay hidden in the broken rubble, waiting for its moment. The lone soldier took one final breath. His heartbeat slowed, his focus sharpened, and the world narrowed to a single decision. He pulled the trigger. The machine gun roared to life, tearing through the silence and sending shockwaves across the battlefield. The first line of enemies collapsed instantly, confusion spreading through their ranks. Shouts and cries replaced the steady rhythm of marching boots. Chaos erupted. He did not smile. He did not celebrate. He only kept firing, knowing this was just the beginning. The first sudden burst of gunfire shattered the fragile calm, ripping into the ranks of the enemy like lightning tearing through a night sky. The soldiers' world narrowed, sights, trigger, recoil, belts of ammunition feeding into the gun. Shadows fell, bodies dropped, confusion bloomed. A cascade of panic swept through the first wave. For a moment, the enemy stopped, as if trying to understand what had torn their orderly march apart. But more were coming, and many more. Dust rose. Mud sprayed as boots slipped, men stumbled over fallen comrades. Screams and curses filled the air, mingling with the harsh bark of the machine gun. The soldier didn't flinch. He didn't hesitate. Each pull of the trigger was an echo of his resolve. The weight of his barrel was the weight of every life behind him, wounded, overwhelmed, hoping for a moment's respite. He was the thin line between despair and survival. Bullets tore through the fog, each one finding a target. The enemy's charge faltered. Men ducked, regrouped, tried to flank, but the soldier anticipated. He swiveled slowly, methodically, never wasting a single round. Another belt clipped in, and he opened fire again, low bursts this time, aimed at ankles, knees, and boots, to trip, to slow, to spread chaos among their ranks. Confusion became their weapon as much as his gun. Behind him, muted thunder, cannon fire, distant mortar blasts, the larger battle raged. But for now, all that mattered was this, a lone man and a machine gun. He refused to let the line break. He refused to let the enemy pass. His face, half hidden in grime, sweat and stayed calm. His breathing stayed steady and his resolve unbroken. Soon, the first wave began to shrink. Men turned to retreat. The wave that had once seemed endless now unraveled into chaos. In that moment, for an instant, the machine gun was silent. The battlefield exhaled. And the soldier allowed himself a single look across the ruined ground, bodies, broken rifles, scattered belts of ammunition, and motionless forms under the smoky gray sky. He knew this was only the start. More would come. More would try. The enemy would regroup. But this first blow, this stand, had bought time. The time for his comrades to reorganize, time for the wounded to find cover, time for reinforcements, perhaps, and time to survive. A low moan rose from the battered earth where the first wave had fallen, a sound between groaning metal and human agony. The air hung heavy with dust, stench of burnt powder, and the distant crackle of further fighting. For a fleeting heartbeat, the field was silent, save for the rustle of shifting bodies and the ragged breathing of survivors. The soldier leaned forward, muscles aching, senses screaming yet focused. His eyes scanned the ground, spent casings glinting in the half-light, the torn webbing of enemy uniforms, a cracked rifle barrel poking from under a boot. Life and death lay together in a patchwork of grime and blood. In that lull he felt more alone than ever. The other side regrouped, he could sense it, the tightening of formation, hushed cursing, the sliding of boots against rubble, the subtle but steady movement of men rearming, preparing for another surge. The weight of the gun was familiar now but burdensome, every unspent round in those belts represented hope and desperation, for him, for his comrades, for the side counting on him to stall the storm. He swallowed the lump of fear in his throat and forced his breath to even out. Fear had no place now, there was only duty, and only resolve. He closed his eyes briefly, letting memory carry him somewhere else, someone's laughing face, distant and warm, the green fields of home, soft in spring sunlight, the promise of life beyond this war. Then he opened them, the faint vision vanishing like smoke in the wind. There was no time for longing, only this moment, only this fight. A distant shouts echoed, low and guttural. The enemy was ready. From somewhere beyond the ruined wall of a collapsed building, figures began to move forward again, slow at first, then steadily. Men carrying rifles slung at their sides, steady, certain they had crushed the defense already. But the soldier was ready too. His body ached. His eyes burned. His hands trembled, but he was not scared. Not anymore. He reloaded carefully, listening to the hollow click of new ammunition belts sliding into place. He adjusted his grip so every movement was precise, economical. Each round would count. Each shot could change everything. The ghostly fog around him seemed to pulse, breath, heartbeat, adrenaline, all in sync with the distant approach of renewed danger. He exhaled slowly, drawing in the cold air. The enemy advanced again, step by endless step. Their numbers felt infinite, their purpose, overwhelming. Yet still he stood. Because sometimes, a single man can be the hammer that stops a tide, and sometimes, a single trigger pull can delay fate. He raised the gun, skimmed the sights, and felt the moment come. He waited. The enemy's second advance came with a colder, more calculated force. There was no confusion this time, no hesitation. They had seen men fall, but they believed sheer numbers would overwhelm whatever lone defender hid in the ruins ahead. Their steps spread across the broken ground, wider and more coordinated, as if trying to drown him beneath a rising tide. The soldier could hear them, boots dragging through mud, gear clanking, quiet muttering as they edged closer. They were learning, adapting, preparing to strike with precision instead of panic. He stayed completely still. His breathing thinned into shallow, measured pulls of air. Every sense sharpened, as though the world slowed around him. A single drop of sweat ran down his temple, but he didn't lift a hand to wipe it. The weight of his machine gun became part of his body, not a tool, but an extension of his will. He listened for the one sound that mattered, the cue that told him the enemy had stepped close enough for his fire to break their formation again. Then it came. A command barked from their flank, sharp, firm, pushing the line forward with sudden aggression. Without thinking, he pressed the trigger and unleashed another storm of bullets. The machine gun roared with renewed fury, slicing through the fog and tearing into the advancing ranks. Men scattered, dropped, spun, tried to throw themselves into ditches or behind fallen bricks, but the gun's reach was relentless. The soldier swung it with deliberate control, sweeping low, then high, then back again, carving through the enemy's push as if cutting threads from a tangled rope. But this wave was different. They didn't collapse immediately. Some pushed forward with desperate bursts of courage, firing wildly as they ran. Others dropped to their knees, steadying rifles, trying to pinpoint the hidden defender. Bullets snapped past him, biting into the wall behind, spraying shards of rock over his back. The soldier clenched his jaw, ignoring the sting. His only path was forward, through the noise, through the chaos, through the rising fear knotting in his chest. He shifted slightly, letting off short, controlled bursts instead of long streams. He could feel the remaining ammunition growing lighter, the belts beside him thinning. The machine gun jolted his arms, and with each recoil, sending vibrations deep into his bones. But he refused to slow. Every enemy he dropped was another moment earned for the men behind him, another breath, another step closer to safety. Still, for all his effort, the enemy kept coming. Every time one fell, another appeared behind him, determined to claim the ground. Smoke thickened around the soldier, wrapping him in a suffocating haze. His lungs burned. His eyes watered. But he stayed locked in place like a stone anchored against a raging river. And for a moment, just a single heartbeat, he wondered if this second wave might be the one that broke him. Smoke curled around him like a tightening rope, stinging his eyes and clawing at his throat. He blinked hard, forcing his vision to stay clear as shadows kept shifting through the haze. The second wave had not broken easily, their determination was stronger, their movements sharper, their fire more controlled. Bullets cracked past him, slicing into the ground and stone with vicious force. Every impact sent dust and debris into the air, turning the ruined outpost into a suffocating cloud of grit. Yet he stayed low, steady, pressing the trigger in short, precise bursts that echoed like thunder in the fog. His arms ached from the recoil. His shoulders burned. The machine gun felt heavier with every shot, as if trying to pull him down with it. But he fought the weight, fought the pain, fought the trembling that began in his fingers and crawled slowly up his arms. He forced himself to breathe through clenched teeth, measuring each inhale so it didn't become a gasp. His body was reaching its breaking point, but his resolve refused to bend. Suddenly, the sound changed. The rhythm of footsteps broke apart. The enemy spread wide, splitting into small groups, trying to circle around him instead of charging straight in. Their commander had realized the truth: a single machine gunner was holding the entire line. And now, they wanted to crush him from every side. He heard those shifting positions, boots scraping against stone, the faint click of rifles being readied, the sharp whispers of men preparing for a final push. He tightened his grip. His mind raced, calculating angles, distances, where they might strike first. If they got too close, the machine gun would lose its advantage. He could not let them surround him. So he pushed forward through the exhaustion, sweeping his weapon across the widening arc of danger. Each sweep tore into the flanking groups, scattering them, forcing them back into cover. The fog lit up with flashes from both sides, muzzle fire cutting through the gray like tiny bursts of lightning. But he could feel it, the pressure closing in. The air grew hotter, heavier. His heartbeat slammed against his ribs, loud enough to drown out the chaos for a moment. His ammunition belts were thinning fast, far too fast. With every burst he fired, he was spending seconds of his survival, trading metal for time. And time was the only thing he had left to give. A bullet ricocheted off the stone inches from his cheek, showering him with splinters. He didn't flinch. He didn't retreat. He dug his elbow deeper into the dirt, anchoring himself like a man planting roots. He fought the wave pressing in from all sides because there was no other choice. If he fell now, the line behind him would collapse. The wounded would be overrun. His comrades would be caught in the open. He whispered under his breath, not a prayer, not a plea, but a vow he had made the moment he was told to hold this position. He would not break. He would not retreat. Not yet. The fog throbbed with gunfire, each burst shaking the ground beneath him. The enemy no longer moved as a single mass. They split, disappeared into broken trenches, hid behind shattered walls, and crept through the ruins like hunters closing in on prey. Their shifting silhouettes flickered in and out of sight, making the battlefield feel alive with danger. The soldier wiped the grit from his brow with the back of his hand, though his vision hardly cleared. Every nerve in his body stayed taut, ready for the next strike. He clipped in another belt, feeling its weight, lighter than the others had been. There wasn't much left. The thought sat heavy in his mind, but he forced it aside. Panic was a luxury he couldn't afford. He had minutes, maybe less, before they tried to rush him again. He adjusted his position, lowering himself behind a jagged stone outcrop, turning his body to guard against flanking fire. Even small movements sent sharp pain through his muscles, but he gritted his teeth and endured it. Then came a sound he recognized too well, the hushed scrape of boots dragging through broken bricks. Close. Too close. Someone was crawling forward, trying to breach the gap and get a clear shot. He held his breath. The mist stirred just enough to reveal the faint outline of a helmet only a dozen meters away. The soldier fired a short burst. The figure collapsed with a thud that echoed through the debris. But that shot triggered everything. Shouts erupted on both sides. The enemy surged, no longer hiding. Rifles flashed in the fog. A grenade clattered somewhere behind him. He swung the machine gun sharply, firing in controlled sweeps as fast-moving shadows darted between ruined pillars. Dust exploded, stones shattered, bodies fell. The ground around him trembled with the force of the new assault. Still, he held. He fought with a fierce precision born from desperation, every burst landing where it mattered. When one group got too close, he shifted and cut them down. When another tried to crawl low through the mud, he angled the barrel and pinned them there. He was a single man, but at that moment, he fought like an entire squad. Yet even as he pushed them back, he felt the tide rising again. More voices, more footsteps and more guns loading. They were preparing for another push, bigger, heavier and unforgiving. His breath steadied. His pulse slowed. He adjusted his stance and braced his aching body. If the previous attacks had been tests, the next one would be the storm. And he knew it. The rumble began as a faint tremor under the ground, a deep, rolling vibration that told him the enemy was gathering in numbers far greater than before. It was the kind of sound soldiers learned to fear long before they ever stepped onto a battlefield. The soldier tightened his grip, feeling the cold metal bite into his palms. His breaths came slow and steady, controlled not because he felt calm, but because panic would only make his hands shake. And shaking hands could mean the end. Through the lifting fog, he began to see movement, not scattered now, not hesitant. This time the enemy advanced with purpose, forming a wide crescent as they pushed forward. They were done testing him. They wanted to crush him in one overwhelming sweep. His position, once hidden in thick mist, was now exposed by the shifting wind. His cover was battered, crumbling and full of bullet holes. There was no way he could withstand a full, close-range assault for long. He checked his remaining ammunition. Only a few belts left, enough for minutes, perhaps less if he had to fire continuously. He ran his thumb over the last belt, feeling the edges of each round. He had used almost everything he carried. Yet he was still here and still holding the line. Still refusing to let fear break through the wall of discipline he had built inside himself. Voices grew louder. Orders rang across the field. Boots pounded in unison. The enemy's final wave was forming, thicker, stronger, determined. He could even hear the metallic clatter of light machine guns being set up among their ranks, the kind he had read about in countless reports detailing the brutal exchanges of infantry fire in World War II, described in historical sources like the Encyclopaedia Britannica's coverage of small arms warfare and battlefield tactics during the era. He repositioned himself lower, bracing the machine gun so its recoil didn't throw him off balance. His heartbeat slowed again, entering that strange, quiet space where fear and focus merged into a single sharp instinct. The world narrowed. Sound faded. And the fog before him parted just enough to reveal dozens, maybe hundreds, of dark shapes pressing forward, like a tide preparing to break its last barrier. He inhaled once, deeply, letting the cold air settle inside him. He exhaled slowly, letting everything else fall away. Then he set his sights on the advancing wave. The storm had arrived, and he was ready to meet it. The enemy surged forward like a relentless wave, their cries, commands, and the harsh rattle of rifles merging into a single, overwhelming roar. The soldiers' world shrank to the rhythm of the machine gun, aim, fire and recoil, reload. Each shot was deliberate, calculated and deadly. He could feel every bullet tearing through the air, every impact shifting the course of the attackers before him. The first few ranks crumpled under the gunfire, then the next, and then the next. But still, more came. The sheer volume of men pressing toward him was staggering, 300 enemies, all driven by the certainty that a single soldier could not possibly hold them back. Smoke and dust mingled, turning the battlefield into a gray blur. The soldier adjusted his position continuously, scanning for flanking movements, anticipating the enemy's attempts to surround him. Every decision had to be perfect. One mistake, one misfire, one lost belt of ammunition could mean the line would fall. Yet despite exhaustion burning through his arms and shoulders, despite sweat and grime blinding his eyes, he did not falter. His mind focused on one thing: hold the line. The enemy's officers yelled orders, trying to rally their men, trying to find a weak point in his defense. But the soldier had none. He was everywhere at once, sweeping his gun, cutting through their charges with ruthless precision. Each enemy that fell slowed the tide just enough for him to adjust, to breathe and to fight again. He became the embodiment of resistance, a singular force against the mass pressing in on all sides. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The ground around him was littered with bodies, spent shells, and the remnants of weapons. Yet the enemy kept coming, their morale wavering only slightly at the relentless resistance. But in the chaos, a subtle shift occurred: hesitation. The wave that had seemed unstoppable now faltered under the weight of unseen hands, the calculated fire of one man refusing to yield. And that hesitation spread. The enemy began to break ranks, then retreat and then scatter. The soldier did not lower his weapon. He remained vigilant, scanning the horizon, watching the last stragglers retreat into the fog. Every muscle ached. His breath was ragged. His eyes burned with exhaustion and grime. But he had done it. Against 300, against overwhelming odds, he had held the line. The battlefield grew quiet, though the silence was heavy, almost deafening after the storm of gunfire and chaos. Smoke curled lazily into the sky, dust settled over the torn earth, and the once organized enemy lines lay broken, scattered, and defeated. The soldier sank to one knee, gripping his machine gun as if it were the only lifeline keeping him tethered to the world. His arms trembled, his chest heaved, but his eyes, though bloodshot and weary, remained vigilant. He had survived. Against impossible odds, he had held the line. All around him, the cost of that stand was visible. Bodies of fallen enemies lay strewn across the mud, their uniforms torn, weapons discarded. The earth was scorched and scarred, a brutal reminder of what had just occurred. Yet in that destruction lay the truth, the position had held. Time had been bought. Lives had been saved. Comrades behind him could regroup, retreat safely, and continue the fight, all because one man had refused to break. The soldier lowered his weapon slightly, allowing his exhausted body a brief moment of relief. He did not feel triumph. Triumph would have felt distant, perhaps even impossible, after the grinding reality of what he had faced. Instead, there did a quiet understand, a bond between him and the battlefield, between duty and survival, between one man and the hundreds he had confronted. History would remember countless such stands, though many would remain unsung. Today, he was one of them, an invisible hero whose courage had tipped the balance of a battle, if only for a fleeting moment. As the mist lifted further and the first rays of dawn pierced through the smoke, the soldier rose slowly, surveying the ground. He checked the belts, reloaded what remained, and scanned for any sign of returning enemies. The line was secure, for now. And though he knew the war was far from over, in that instant, he had accomplished what seemed impossible. One soldier, one machine gun, 300 enemies, and the line had held. History remembers acts like these not for the numbers, not for the strategy, but for the courage and resolve that define the human spirit in its darkest hours. And while the world may never know his name, that day, that stand, that unwavering determination had changed the course of countless lives.